Welcome to Team Peri's Step Out of Line podcast, featuring co-hosts Peri and Lori Finkelstein.
For our podcast, Peri's voice is represented by a communication device, or rather AI technology, to ensure that all can hear and understand her speech.
Together, they explore, meet, and share inspirational stories with guests who have made a positive impact in today's world. This podcast resonates with our hope to make this world a better place one step at a time through love, acceptance, and uplifting conversations.
I think if you asked my mother, she would agree that the moment I stepped out of line, the moment that I stopped settling for normal or trying to pass as acceptable and started speaking out as a disabled person, but with some perspective beyond my own experience. I was drafted into being a poster child when I was 5 years old. That was very simple. I went out on stage and the line was, "Thanks to you, it's working. Thanks to you, I'm walking." All the emphasis was put on walking. And I discovered at some point that walking was overrated. I think what was more important was, can everybody participate? Can everybody get into the same schools or the same restaurants or the same city council meetings or whatever the thing might be? And it was really probably college when those realizations hit me. What you learn through time is that sometimes only by breaking the rules do you make new ones and create new possibilities. And sometimes when you fit inside those narrow lines, a new way possible can't even occur. A new way forward can't even become a possibility. And so it's when we dare to think outside the box that changes really get made.
Tell us about the ReelAbilities Film Festival.
We know it started very small. How did you get such momentum and be embraced so widely that it is such a huge success?
It's a fascinating story because my own involvement predated ReelAbilities by just a little bit. I had a monthly screening series in New York City that was a 6-month experiment that lasted 4 years. And we were doing one screening a month on disability themes. And it was in the middle of that process that ReelAbilities Film Festival began. And what I think both of those projects have shown is that there was, one, a market for doing disability differently, and that Isaac Zablocki and Anita Altman and Ravit Turjaman, who really took the idea that was ReelAbilities and made it into a film festival, which is now bigger than a film festival, because ReelAbilities is a year-round nonprofit that does work outside of when the festival happens in April. I think the film festival will always be our centerpiece, but we do work year-round to put the past in perspective. Our festival showcases work that's being done today, the present, by disabled creatives, and then working to make the industry, the entertainment and the media industries, more inclusive and more accessible. And those things grew out of what we learned by screening the movies. We found that when people got together, you have a magical opportunity when you're sitting in a movie theater together to process what you've just watched on screen through the point of view or the perspectives of somebody sitting across the aisle from you who may have a totally different life experience, but may ask a question that makes a light bulb go off inside your head. And so you're processing what you just saw through the experience of somebody else, and you get to have a conversation about it, which I think gives it more depth and more perspective. And it was having those necessary conversations with people that said, we've got to do more than showcase movies. While that's important, we've also got to change society. And so the work really just grew from the annual film festival to be over a dozen affiliate festivals around the country, and to do work with our industry summit. When you think about disability in film, the tendency is to think about acting, who you see on screen, who gets to play the roles. But we're going deeper than that to think about the art and craft of filmmaking. So it's not only who appears on screen, which is important, but who gets to write that story, who's directing that story, who's producing that story, who gets to make the decisions in terms of what movies get made and by whom and how. And so it was really, as the organization has grown into be our own independent nonprofit, which happened just a little bit over a year ago, and as we reach our 18th birthday, which will be this year with our 18th festival, which will be held April 23rd to April 30th in New York City, that we knew that we had to grow to not only showcase the work that was being made, but to address the situations in society, the changes in society that need to happen that we became aware of and that we knew that were important based on the conversations that we had following the movies and about the movies.
Peri is a speaker and she's done speaking engagements and in front of an able-bodied audience. She's trying to educate them that she is just as much as a person as they are, even though her abilities are different. And I feel like sometimes she's like a lone man on an island screaming and who's listening. And I feel like your nonprofit is the loudest voice that can be heard because you're all doing it together, manifesting in every different possible way that a film is made. And I think it's extraordinary. But I'm also thinking, wow, Peri is very lonely in what she's doing. And she's also trying to publish a memoir. And she's told, well, you might want to go to this agent because they will take on a client with disabilities and showcase that. But why is it still such a big deal in 2026 that there's such a distinction between, well, this is a disability film and this is a non-disability film, and this is a writer with a disability and this is a writer who doesn't have a disability? Why is there still such a distinction?
I think it's such a distinction because society has traditionally thought of disability in monochrome ways. You could be one of two things. You could be tragic or heroic. You could overcome something or be inspirational, but that's really it. And ReelAbilities is much more interested in the kaleidoscope that we've gotten to know. What do we mean when I say that? We mean more perspectives, more possibilities, more contradictions, more ways of shaping a story or telling a story. That's where life gets richer. And that's where art gets better. For ReelAbilities, this isn't about inclusion in the narrow sense. It's about changing that frame itself. Who is visible? Who gets to be complex? Who gets to make meaning? Who gets to make the movie rather than simply appear in one? Representation without influence is little more than decoration. And so, to my mind, things won't really improve unless we really get to the heart of the matter. And that's when we're talking about things like authorship, artistry, decision making, who gets the opportunity. And that's about shaking up society. That's about really the bigger picture. But I think sometimes the beauty of film is that if you don't see it, you can't dream it. And if you can't dream it, you can't be it. So what we do at ReelAbilities is we both want to be more reflective of reality. If you look at just the number of disabled characters on screen, not even disabled actors, but just characters that you see, the numbers for those have fluctuated for the last decade between 1% and 3%. Now, if you look at the numbers from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, you'll see that the number of disabled people just in the United States alone, let's narrow it to that, is 28.7%. So we've got a long way to go before we're really truly representative or truly reflecting society. But not every film is a documentary either. One of the other things that film is uniquely poised to do and positioned to do is to ignite imagination. Show us the world as it could be. Help us imagine a better future, a more inclusive future, where people have more opportunities to learn and grow and test their skills and develop those skills into what is actually a career. So I think what you're talking about is society hasn't yet fully adopted all that disability is. I think it's still thinking of disability in very narrow ways, something that's, medical as a diagnosis, something we try to fix or cure. We understand that disability is much broader than that. As you dive into the world and get to know disabled individuals and disability communities, we just passed the Academy Awards and awards season in Hollywood. I think traditionally, dating back 100 years, disability has been something to be portrayed, a way that an actor can get an award for really working hard and developing, showing that skill. But we know that disability is much more than that. From our perspectives, disability is a point of view. It's a source of artistry. It can fuel the work that you create. It's a way of moving through the world. And really, depending on the type of disability you have, it can epitomize your relationship to so many things: time, space, access, caregiving, vulnerability, honesty, adaptation, interdependence, and even survival, if you're thinking about it politically. And so all of those things can expand rather than narrow the creative possibilities that we have, both for our work that we create in our lives, if we let them, if we allow them to. But before we can do that, we need to stop treating disability as some kind of symbol or some kind of lesson and start engaging with it in all its complexities as a part of life. So, not a metaphor, not a lesson, not a burden, but life. When we start doing that, we'll be able to have more layers within the stories that we're telling. And I think more opportunities and possibilities for disabled people.
When you look at the arts, we have music, writing, acting, film, everything that you just spoke about. What do you want to see more of in the disability community, and also in Hollywood, in the next 5 to 10 years?
What we've been able to showcase at ReelAbilities, adopted by the larger world. An understanding that disability is more than a diagnosis, an understanding that disability is also a lived experience, and it's a community, and it's a political identity that's shaped by all kinds of things: generations of exclusion and resistance and organizing and pride. And like I said before, survival. So I think honoring that there is a such thing as disability history and refusing to erase that is what we'd like to see more of, because it's about being honest. And when we sanitize disability, we also remove the barriers and the bias and the brilliance that comes as a result of living with a disability. And I think you can't connect to a movement if you refuse to name it. The customary way of viewing disability is to say that someone was successful despite their disability. Although the people I've gotten to know, both prior to working with ReelAbilities and especially since I've been working with ReelAbilities, are often successful because of their disabilities. Because their disabilities taught them to be dogged and determined and to adapt and to improvise and to be creative. And those are all skills that not only filmmakers need, but people in the world need in order to be successful, especially in rapidly changing times like these. And so I think what we'd like to see more of is an understanding of that. The disability is more than a performance. It really gets to the heart of how one experiences the world and then how one shapes the world in terms of how they relate to it and what they can bring to others.
I think that would be when somebody is looking to employ somebody. I always thought, why not go to somebody who has a disability, knowing that they got to this point in their life because they worked so hard to get through life, and they're probably more creative, more adaptable to changes that might happen in the work environment. They probably offer more than anybody else, even because of where they've been. Like a lot of Peri's friends who graduated high school with her and they went on to college and graduate school, they're having such a hard time finding jobs. And why is that? It's 2026. Why are they having such a problem? Because they're like a second thought, and they should not be a second thought. They should be equal or more than somebody else.
A big part of changing that is telling different stories and changing who gets to tell them, because you can have the best performance in the world, but if they got the story wrong, or if the story is the same old, the same old tragic, or the same old heroic story, you're not really making a difference in the world. You're simply recreating what we've seen a million times before. And so part of the mission of Real Abilities is about not looking at disability as a checkbox or a one-off theme. It's not a genre. We're interested in, and what we do with our festival is we explore disability as culture and as craft and as community. And that's why the screenings matter and the conversations about the movies matter and the industry pipeline matters. Because until we change who tells the stories, we're probably not going to come up with better ones. And we've seen that over and over again, especially over the last 5 years, where the numbers of movies that we've received have increased and the quality of those movies have gotten better and better each year. And so I think it's a model that needs to be exported into the world at large so that other people can learn what we've learned and then adapt in those ways that are more reflective, as I said, of reality, but also expanding imagination.
I am sure that you can agree that people with disabilities step out of line every day, as it's the norm. Can you elaborate as to why you think this is?
I would say anytime you try to fit somebody else's mold, it's not going to fit you perfectly. Disabled people have always tried to mold ourselves, to bend, to contort, to squeeze ourselves into a model that simply doesn't work. And if it doesn't work, then we need to change it. We've been conditioned to settle for normal. And I don't think anybody should do that. We're capable of more if given the opportunity to do more. So while society will tell us time and time again that we have to make disability more palatable to the rest of the world, I would say we're not interested in that. What we're interested in is making society more honest. And the work we do at Real Abilities is a part of that honesty. It's about expanding the frame and about widening the circle and insisting that disabled people, and by extension, disability communities, are not just in the story, but central to shaping what stories get told, who gets to tell them, and how they're told. So that means I think we've got to do a lot of different things to have a broader, deeper, more expansive understanding of what disability is. I think we have to put the past in perspective, understand why the world was the way it was, or why disability was seen the way that it was seen. I think we've got to showcase the work that's being made today because it constantly blows my mind. Every year, the work that we see is just getting better and better, and more people need to have an opportunity to make those stories. And that's why things like our industry summit that we do at Festival works to create a more inclusive future, both in the entertainment industry, but also in the world that entertainment depicts and shows. So we can have this ripple effect beyond what somebody sees in the movie to say, I want my life to be more like that, or I don't want my life to be that, and then be a reaction to it or a response to it. And so it seems very clear that disabled people are uniquely positioned to break the mold because we never fit in their mold to begin with. I think it's making that leap to understanding that and embracing that where we can finally become ourselves and then create a different path for the world.
What is one thing that nobody knows about you?
My work has been media for most of my life. When I turned to do disability advocacy, I had always identified as a disabled person, but wasn't involved in community or advocacy or any of those things until much later, until my mid-30s. And I think one realization that I've had through that process. And I've now been focused primarily on disability work, if you will, for over 20 years. When I was growing up in the Midwest in Indiana, there weren't any other disabled role models that I knew of. In fact, in school, the disabled people that I came in contact with, we all kind of distanced ourselves from each other and didn't really join together and find that solidarity and find that community that I've been talking about. And so I think one thing that people probably don't know, and I don't even know that I've said this explicitly, but I find as I get older, have a little more gray hair, and get hopefully wiser as a result of those experiences, that we could be, and we as a culture, capital W, we, and me as an individual, could be guided by the kind of life that we live. And so my primary focus now, and this was one of the things that brought me to ReelAbilities, was a desire to be the me that I needed at those different stages in my life. So whether it was 15 years old, 20 years old, 25 years old, 30 years old, 40 years old, 50 years old, I didn't often see the mentors or the role models that I needed in those days. And I didn't get to know them until later in life. And so I think a driving passion for me now, whereas before it was to sort of get myself ahead and find my station in life and carve out an identity or a career. Now it's about taking what I've lived, what I've learned, and paying that forward or passing it on to whoever, however it's meaningful to them in their life. So to be the me that I needed at that point in time to somebody else. I think that's increasingly important given just sort of where I'm at and the opportunities that I have, but also given the state of the world today. If we don't do that, there's not going to be a next generation to continue this work, and they're not going to have an opportunity to do it differently. So I find that motivation is new, relatively, given my lifespan, but the importance is so great. And the desire is so powerful for all the things that I've been blessed to learn and to understand throughout more than 40 years in various kinds of advocacy. Peri, what are you passionate about right now and most focused on doing?
It was her TED Talk, but she did that. That was like a big thing in her life.
Now I'm focusing on my book.
But she has a very snarky perspective of her life. And she won't let me read a lot of it because she says, wait till I'm published because you won't be happy with it. She's really just letting it all out.
I'm a little bit older than you, Peri. I'd venture to say, and I bet my own money on this, that the world can use a few more disabled folks with attitude and snark. I think a lot of times snark is a good way to cut through the nonsense and to really speak to these issues and experiences in a way that people can get kind of slapped upside the head and wake up to them. I'd say what you're doing is absolutely 100% needed.